waiting music
Yes.
for our intro for these sessions.
Yeah. Andrew, how's your singing voice? You can't maybe just add a tune while we're waiting.
Morning, Andrea.
Hello, Andrea.
Well, yeah, and it's amazing.
If you guys are in the mood for any children's songs, I can hoil. I'm very well practiced in that at this stage. Beyond Klimmy Berg and songs. Wheels on the Bus. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Got a variety. You can put in your requests, yeah. Definitely submit a request for the next one that we are hosting. I'll be ready. Okay, glad to hear that. Andrew can join, given that he's got 2 little ones as well. I'm sure he's also quite in tune.
I'll add the harmony, surely.
Hello, Henriette. Hello, Klein Jan.
Hi, Marissa.
Hi, Yoni.
Oh, Morrison as well.
Hi, hello.
Good morning. Another minute, and then we can start. For those of you who'd like to grab a cup of coffee, don't think that you'll miss a lot if you do that quickly. Probably the 3rd one of the day already. It's been a week.
But it's payday and it's Friday.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, and the athletics on television at the moment. Man, I don't know why it excites me, because I've never been somebody that was ever on, able to do any of those things. Meaning I didn't even make a team, even if I tried in any of those long jumps. So my kids last night as well started asking, so what did mom do when you were younger? I'm like, no, I sat in the pavilion and I sang songs. But no, I appreciate people with those talents a lot. Okay, we've got it as 11 o'clock. Fantastic. Hello, Henrietta. Nice to see you as well. I am going to do a little bit of an introduction just for those of you who may be joining us for the first time. So this is an experimental thing that we're running from a JVR perspective. You may have seen the topic being open dialogues. And the idea behind this is we often find ourselves in JVR discussing and debating a variety of topics. And I think it is due to the nature of psychology. There's really a lot of gray areas in our discipline. And you know what, we just thought that there's so much learning and discussion and thinking that happens in between us in these conversations. Why not open it up to clients and colleagues? And I really believe that there will be value both for us and for people joining in these conversations. So the intention here is definitely not to lecture. The intention is not for us to present anything. The intention is also not for us to sell anything. It is really merely to start a conversation about a variety of topics. So today's topic, Keith will do a little bit of an introduction around talent audits and position the topic for us. And then we need to engage with questions and comments. And we may disagree and we may agree. And we would really urge everybody to take part in it. If you don't feel comfortable switching on video and you want to engage in a different manner, you can send us an email afterwards. You can add a question to the chat. You'll see that there might be some questions posted in the chat as we go through as well. But the intention here is really just to open up a little bit of a conversation. And as I said, today's topic is talent audits, actually doing a talent audit and whether that is done, how it's being done. And I think Keys is perfectly positioned on our side as a senior researcher at JVR to just position this topic to us a little bit and then to start the conversation. So on that note, Keys, over to you.
Thanks, Jan. I think Esther already put a question in our chat, but just to get to know our audience a little bit, do you use talent audits and in your organizations, and does personality assessments feature in those audits at all? You can either unmute yourself or type it in the chat.
He's just out of, for some of you may know this and some may not, but I am situated in the Free State and in the town in Bethlehem. And I actually, earlier in the week, had a client meeting with a prominent security firm. They're medium-sized, small to medium-sized business, just over about 60 individuals or people working for the company. And it was interesting. What they asked for was to know who they have in the organization, what they can do with that, with the individuals and the potential and the skills that they have. But they didn't ask for an audit, and they didn't also know exactly what it is that they asked for, meaning they wanted to understand their staff, but it was communicated in a different manner. So I would also be curious to know whether people are actually referring to it as a talent audit as well.
So I think while we wait for some answers to come through, there's some people call it performance management. Others are calling it talent audits or talent management. And then some of us are just very comfortable with calling it, those performance reviews, those annual reviews that nobody wants to do. And I think that we could start the open discussion there, maybe, that there's so many. We all need to manage our talent, especially with brain drain happening in the country at the moment, and we want to really manage the talent that we have within our organizations, and let's see if personality can fit in there. I think in general, or maybe it's just my perception, something like your talent management processes tend to be quite negatively received. They tend to be those annual reviews that you have once a year. You sit with your manager and they kind of tell you everything you've done wrong over the year, more than really balancing out your personal development plan. So I think from our side, I'd love to talk about that today, how we can actually leverage what your personality profiles look like and how we can use that against a talent audit. But yes, Manisha saying talent mapping. So I think that's a nice phrase that we can use, and we'll refer to it maybe as talent mapping during the course of the day. But I think, yeah, to your point, when you some of our clients won't necessarily look personality and cognition. They're very psychological terms, right? So if you're talking to business, they won't necessarily say what the psychological profiles of my team and how can we work with them. It's that's not what they ask. They just like, okay, what is it that I have? And it would be us as the industrial psychs or our HR teams that actually come in and do these types of assessments to understand what the talent is within the organization. Yeah, so I think any other comments on what else we call it? Are people on this call actually involved with these talent audits or talent mapping? How does it work in your organizations? Or is it just something that happens? Again, I think we often hear clients say they want to do this performance review so that they can restructure, which again feeds into this negative connotation of what a performance management process can be. Okay. I wonder if we should maybe start with an example of what we've done at JVR, Jan? And then, yes, okay. So I think we specifically, again, this isn't a marketing opportunity for us. It really is just some of the work that we've done. As Yanni said, we're from the research team. So So we speak data, and that's where I'm slightly more comfortable talking about. I hope you can all see. So last year we had an opportunity to really collect management ratings on over 300 leaders. So management, your lower, medium, and senior management, and we had their managers rating their leadership performance. And these individuals, if you can recognize the scales at the bottom, that they all completed the Hogan personality inventory as well. And I think, yeah, I have that open for you, and can take your screenshots if you want. But it's kind of a clear pattern that our higher performing individuals tend to have higher scores on our personality, or our Hogan personality inventory overall. And I think that by itself was quite nice to see that our personality assessments can differentiate between high and low performing individuals, purely because that's the whole purpose, right? So if they're not being, if they can't differentiate between a high and low performing leader, then there's no value in it. So I think that was quite nice to see. And then what we were doing when we were following our process. So what I have on screen now was on the full sample of 320 some odd managers. And then with each of these clients, we really sat with the psychologist on this team, or their leading HR practitioner, and kind of help them balance what we were calling a talent audit, but you can take on many names as we're trying to pick up here. And what we were doing with each company was really trying to say, okay, fine, let's take these Hogan results, or your personality results. It doesn't have to be Hogan. And what personality is telling you is these are your behavior traits, and this is the potential you as an individual have to display certain abilities. And many of our clients then would take these, we in our case would use the assessment results as is. Other clients would take these assessment results and convert them into competencies that again are indicators of, are you able to display certain behavior? And actually effectively displaying that behavior would be an indication of your performance. So let's see then, how does your potential as measured by psychometrics actually link to your actual performance as rated by your manager, knowing that your self-ratings of performance might be a little bit more subjective than your manager. So with each client then, I have fictitious data in here, but with each client, we were then going in with something like this. So your managers have completed the HPI. We could pick up, as you could see from the previous slide, there were these trends that generally all of our scales on the HPI were predictive of leadership performance, and we were plotting then an overall personality potential over here compared to their actual performance as rated by their managers. And when we're talking talent audits or talent management from a JBR perspective, this would be the type of diagram we're talking about. It's a little bit of a simplification of the general 9-box plot that has been around for years. On that note, I'm going to stop again just to hear any comments on the value of this type of graphic, if it's useful at all. How comfortable are you using these types of graphics?
I would love some of the other input, but Keith, you were the one that compiled this for one of the client presentations that we had. Yes, and it just landed with me, this how simple it is, but how long we were able to actually have a conversation around the information that was gathered in this. So with the slide that you started off with, and just confirming that using psychometric assessments in general, if it's got the solid, the research backing it, side comment, but that it does predict performance. So the importance of understanding your company's bench strength when it comes to assessment. So it's not merely selecting them into it, but to understand, so what am I operating with? How does the talent in this organization look like? And then this very beautiful, simple 4-box plot with, now I understand I've got people with potential. If you look at the x-axis here, I've got about 5 people, 17% of the sample that I assessed, with potential, psychometrically potential, but they're not performing. So why on earth are they not performing? And what should I do? The same with, I had, this specific sample, 13 individuals that are both high performing and then with high potential. But here again, you've got your higher performance, but low potential individuals on the left-hand, right-hand corner. And one of the first questions that the client asked, which I thought was something that we can pose to you as well, is, so where do I start now? Do I start with my low performers, low potential, identifying development areas for them? Or do I start with my low performers, high potential? Or do I actually invest more in my high performance, high potential to actually create succession planning to keep them, to retain them? And out of interest, I don't know if any of you got a, knowing that we don't have all the context and we don't necessarily know the organization size, etc. But out of interest, any thoughts as to what would be the most important category for you as a consultant or for you as an individual to think of starting, and why?
Just to add what people think, I think it's so difficult to say because it would really depend on the purpose. For example, like if you just want to play to people's strength and where do I fit people, you might start in a different quadrant. Or now you've just been given a lack of budgets and you need to get people up to speed, like you might start in a different part of the quadrant. I think it really does depend. That's my 2 cents. But I do have a question to Keys, and maybe it's for later, about what you do in different parts of the quadrant. If you're thinking about personality as one of the metrics, and we say it's quite stable, how does that fit into development? Like, what are we actually talking about? On one side of our mouths, we're saying it's stable and it's not going to change, and on the other side of the mouth, it's for developments and we want you to change. Like, how do you manage that, or how would you answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's cover it in a little bit. I see Manisha's hand is up.
I think, it has to do with context
Mm.
of the organization as well. What are they trying to achieve by doing this type of audit? I think it's also, what is their philosophy and around talent? There's always budgetary constraints. So where do we actually start with high performers, or do we invest in individuals that are not necessarily performing? It really comes back to how they see talent and what they have available. I also found that, within these audits as well, it has to do with what is also going to fit in with their business strategy, and what they actually trying to achieve really then determines which sort of box they would like to sort of focus on. So I think it's bespoke for each client.
Manisha, I absolutely agree with you. And one thing, just thinking of the example now as well, if knowing that it's a little bit unfair with us having a little bit more context, one should again also not, as psychologists, ignore other sources of information that should inform the skills audit in its current form. I was just thinking about comments around experience and skills in terms of contributing factors which resulted in high performers, and not necessarily only looking at the psychological area of having potential, etc. So on the one hand, I think I relatively often come across audits being done on staff, but it's very much skills related. It's very much around, okay, what qualifications do we have? What expertise do we have in the system? But they sometimes ignore the psychological part of it, the personality part of it. And I agree to your point. It depends on strategy. Is it it depends on where you want to go, depends on budget, depends on where do you want to, all of that's going to inform where you start. But it's just so nice to see the types of conversations. If you think of L&D, I cannot imagine an L&D person being able to really identify where should one start with development initiatives without having a sense of what this organization's makeup is. Who do I work with, and where do they sit? Who's performing and who's not performing? But I agree with your point. I mean, context, strategy, business priorities will be essential to understand.
I think just to add on to your comment, it's also about, is the individual occupying a very critical role? That's also important in determining the strategy around development and where you're going to actually focus your attention. Yeah,
absolutely. This specific sample was your senior, your professionals, so high risk positions to get them optimally performing, but to your point, so to some extent the 5 individuals, that's both low potential, low performance, for a leadership position or management, people who has got quite an impact on teams and others, one would need to address them, or that category with some urgency and with a clear strategy. But to your point, if this was any and all organizational levels, there would have been less risky positions to immediately address versus more high risk positions to address performance on.
Absolutely. And I think Manisha she said something so meaningful, because for one of our clients who participated in the study with us, we did exactly this plot with them, and during the feedback or the debrief with them, we actually saw a lot of people sitting. It was almost the inverse of the example I have on screen now. And when we were talking about that context at the time, it was like, okay, they have done so many performance ratings in the last 6 months. That team had just gone through a restructure, and it was a case of it was a volatile setting. And we said, okay, fine, maybe let's just discard some of those performance ratings for a little bit, because it was the team against the manager within that specific department. So context, again, like as Manisha is saying, so important to understand when you're doing these performance ratings, what the value of that is, and that it's not almost like a backstabbing, let's all just rate this person really bad on everything, so that we can get them out of the role, and that these performance ratings are an actual representation of their performance. But even from a personality perspective, yes, it's not like a cognitive assessment that if you're completing it at midnight, it might change your percentile score by 20 or 30%. That has quite a large implication. But at the same time, you also want these individuals to be completing their assessments in a pretty stable, standard situation as per best practice as well. So if you do have individuals who are completing things in a rush, it's just another email, another thing that they needed to tick off. Of course, there's a lot of issues with this type of plot. Then, if we can't trust the performance ratings, if we can't trust that this is this person's actual potential, but assuming that those ratings and rankings were happening under nice situations and with a fairly healthy environment around them, then I think there is value to that. Before I go into Andrew's comment about development, any other comments on where we could start, keeping in mind budget, of course.
Can I ask maybe some of the AMs? So Lizelle, just out of curiosity, do you have clients asking for this or not really? Is this old, new, different?
It's not old. It's definitely. I also don't want to say it's new because people do use it, but at this stage, from my side, I'm not really getting questions on it. And if somebody vaguely goes into that direction, it's almost as if they're kind of unsure as to how do I start, what will be the perfect time, if I need to put this into a proposal, like what is the ROI going to be on this, what will my role as a psychologist be, and so I don't have in-depth experience with this process, but I think it's a super idea to for us to start off with this. But I would personally like, I'm actually here for selfish reasons. I want to hear other people give us some examples of them using this and what worked and what didn't work. So yeah, I'm all ears, everybody else on the call, but yeah, just to your point, Yanni, from my side, nothing major, massive questions at this stage. I don't know if it's because of the rand dollar rate that people are keeping back on it, or if they're just not as familiar or as comfortable with it. But yeah,
Very, very valid point. We're immediately talking volumes if you talk audit or mapping, and to your point, if we talk volume, it will need to, be considered from a budgetary perspective as well. Just out of curiosity, before we go to, I know Andrew's question is still hanging, but I would like just to know, Nicola Kiever, from an L&D perspective, you being a certified trainer, knowing that I can't see you, is it just me that can't see you? Oh, there she comes back. From an L&D perspective, are you familiar with companies actually asking for a mapping or a strategy around where to start with development, needing to understand my staff, as a holistic, or getting a holistic view of them prior to investing in development initiatives?
Yanni, no. I think it would work so well to engage with us at this stage already, but they don't. Most organizations, in fact, I cannot think of any organization that does it differently. Most organizations would come to us, after they would see this quadrant, well, not quadrant, but this graph. Saying, so we have these high potential individuals, they don't perform, what can you do? So at that point, they only engage with us. And the one thing that I was sitting here thinking about is the role of emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence training before doing this talent assessment. If that's going to have any impact on the individual's performance, because once again, I think organizations see emotional intelligence, just do something for this low performer to start performing, do a bit of EQ training, and we had it in this week. As a matter of fact, I think I realize now that I am maybe quite sheltered regarding that, buying into the whole idea of emotional intelligence and the making emotional intelligence part of who you are. It's not an external quick fix that you can, that the organization can quickly pay a few thousand rands and the individual is going to start performing. And I think it's quite prevalent, that idea out there. But Yanni, coming back to your original question, no, they don't engage at this point. They engage for us to deliver a quick fix quite often.
Yes, and I do see Charlene's hand being up as well. To your point with regards to emotional intelligence, Keys, am I correct in saying, so this specific graph, the potential that we've measured here was only personality, or even though I know we use cognition, but this is now reported on personality. But due to the fact that we know the EQ 2.0, for example, I'm not bashing any other EQ measure, but there where it's proven to predict performance could be replaced. So, for example, one would be able to pull together an EQ map, but then to Manisha's point, I think what would be critical there would to ensure that where you map your individuals with potential on EI versus performance, you need to at least know that the level of the person in the organization and the jobs to be done requires EI, or I mean, we know that it is relevant across company, but I can imagine leadership influencing others would be very insightful to be able to map or plot on an emotional intelligence version of this. This is now the personality version. Yes, just commenting, Nicola, to what you referred to as well. I do see, Charlene, your hand was up, and then I would also just wanted to ask Iris afterwards whether they come across clients asking for it in different words.
If you don't mind, John, and sorry, Iris, for interrupting, but mine is echoing what Nicola said. So I would like to just mention something. It's exciting to hear Nicola's input more from a practical perspective, because theoretically, that is also something that popped into my mind, the effect of your emotional intelligence on this. If we go back to Kiza's slide where the facets that really plug into performance, if we look at those, it's your sociability and it's working with others, that interpersonal relationship. So it makes sense theoretically why Nicola would say the importance of emotional intelligence and training that facet, because we look at those scales that are so important for not only leadership but just performance in general. And it makes sense because these people have to work with others, influence others, and hopefully in a positive way. And if we look at that social and we look at that interpersonal and how that also nicely links to our top 10 skills, 2025 skills, it so taps into that human aspect of things. Those things AI cannot do for us. Those things machines cannot do for us. And I can just theoretically also understand what an impact it will have, spending a bit of time focusing on those elements. Yes, we call it EQ, call it whatever you want to call it, but I can understand what an impact that will have even on your personality scales, especially if that person is willing to take in new information and willing to work on it. We know that Hogan themselves said there's hope then, even something such as personality, you can improve on in these development areas. So yeah, I just saw that golden thread and I just wanted to make a comment on that. I hope I made sense.
No, absolutely, but you now touched on answering Andrew's question as well, and I was wondering, I mean, to some extent, is there anyone that's got an opinion about it? So we talk about personality. You now referred to it, Charlene, as if we were to work on EI, it would have an impact on personality as well. But just out of curiosity, is there anybody that's got a view of when we talk about personality and the development of personality? I mean, what's the sense of doing an audit on something that is not development, if that's a word, if you cannot develop it, or if you can't change it? Out of curiosity, is there anybody that's got a view or opinion? Nicolette?
Yes, let me see if I can put down. Hello, everybody. So where we've used personality assessments in the past, okay, so obviously I use quite a bit of career guidance and career coaching and stuff, but where we found it quite valuable is to create very fun and interactive
workshops around conflict management. So you start with doing the personality, or what we've done in the past. Sorry, that was for a previous company I worked with. We would start with personality assessments to create a baseline, and then use that as awareness of self, and then awareness of other, and then speak around like how personality traits and behaviors manifest themselves, and our perceptions of people's personalities, or maybe stereotypical perceptions that we have around it, and then you get to address those kind of elements around it as well. So yeah, it might be a fixed thing, but I think in helping people understand themselves and address stereotypes around what we've been brought up to believe about certain personality traits, that created like a fun baseline for us to grow or to manage conflict management and do activities around it.
Yeah, I absolutely 100% agree with what you're saying, in that your personality is relatively stable, but for you to gain strategic insight, to understand how and what the impact is on others and how you need to manage it to actually get better results from a conflict management perspective, as you now refer to as an example, is where the power of managing behaviors, and then slowly, I do believe that you'll see a slight shift. And again, we all refer to therapy as a example of that. One may be able to see change, even though it might be incremental and over long periods of time with intentional effort that needs to go into it. But I do believe insight and managing that, so just gaining that strategic insight already, will definitely have a positive impact on performance and ultimately on behavior as well, or changing of personality. So love your example as well, Nicolette. Any other thoughts, or Andrew, you were the one asking the questions. What's your view on it?
I'll wait for Keys, but I just want to say, I want to hear what Jana has to say. I don't want to put her on the spot. I know she did some
much experience,
work with real
experience there.
when it comes to assessments and what the business needs, and using assessments like in the whole kind of talent management life cycle, if you will. I'd love to hear her thoughts. But I was looking at that graph, just another digression, sorry, was that if you think about those assessments were done within the business, it's what they had, what they were working with, but it's also seems to be building a case for me of using assessments for selection, because if you look in the quadrants, the true positives and the true negatives, it almost was 60% you're getting right. Yes, there's some others that are outliers, in which you'll generally always get, but it was speaking to like these things are doing what they say they're going to do, but now what is I guess the question. But back to you, Keys. I want to hear what you have to say about the developing personality.
Jana, are you? Just want to check. I know Andrew put Jana on the spot now. I don't actually see Jana's name yet, but Jana, do you have an opinion? Sorry, Keith, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to see if we can.
Iris also has a hand up.
Please go for it, Iris.
Sorry, just finding that unmute button. Yeah, just to concur what Andrew is saying, I think, doing a lot of feedbacks and things, with managers and things, it comes back to that value add on this level. And I think this slide brings back that value that it also can bring on the assessments as well. So, Keys, I think this is quite a powerful, but a very simple way of representing that value that assessment results can bring. So actually plotting that against, the information that we've got and that you get from the assessment results. So it's such a nice way of representing that and saying, but, that's where we've got that information from your own candidates, from what we've gathered from the assessments. And, gaining that back from what you asked, Yoni, previously from, my insight from an account manager as well, that is exactly what we gather. They might have a nice interview, they might have a nice track record, but, the assessments might just give another different picture and view from the candidate. So it's so nice just to see that, this is where that type of, insight might be gathered from the actual assessment results as well. So this is really something just to keep in mind, to also use when one do actually have that feedback sessions with a line manager, or, with a more senior manager as well. So yeah, really nice. I really like that. Thanks.
Thanks,
Nicolette.
Yes, I think I just want to like kind of add on to that is depending on which industry you are operating in, there's oftentimes a little bit of a minefield that you need to manage, specifically if assessments or certain decisions need to be made in a unionized environment, for example. And you might get people coming forward and say, but decisions are being made that are very subjective and favoritism and this, that, and the next thing. So whether it's for selection or whether it's for development programs or whether we're using it for promotional purposes, if you have assessments part of the process, it adds that little bit of objectivity to it to address blind spots in two places. Firstly, there might be a blind spot in people that are trying to make decisions on who to choose. And secondly, the actual candidate might also be blind spots, which we now have the opportunity to address. Obviously, you need to have, a little bit of a skill set around how you're going to address those kind of conversations. But in that sense, yeah, I definitely do agree with her. It adds that level of objectivity, which I feel is necessary. And if you're on a company's perspective, just protects you a little bit from any claims of nepotism or favoritism or whatever. And then that opportunity where you get to address blind spots, because if you use assessments correctly, you can kind of pick up if there's dissonances between what goes on a CV, what you hear in an interview, and what you see on an assessment. And truth be told, you get some people that maybe they got somebody professional to do their CV, so it looks like it ticks all the boxes. And you get somebody that is very well spoken, so they come across like really well in an interview. And then when you go do the assessments and, if you do competency assessments and stuff on top of that, you could start seeing red flags which you didn't notice earlier, and then you can explore that. Because at the end of the day, getting the wrong person into a company is the most expensive mistake you can make. It's around the training costs involved in it, the induction costs, the onboarding costs, somebody's going to spend some time mentoring and coaching them. You need to make some allowances for them to get used to the job. And then if you then figure out there's performance issues, then you have that whole IR process you need to go through in order to performance manage them. So it's just that extra step that comes in that gives you a little bit more peace of mind in your selection and recruitment processes.
No, I absolutely agree with all your points made. I do see Jona's hand is up as well.
Yeah, wait, let me just see if I can get my video going. There we go. Yeah, so maybe just from a ex-client perspective, sorry, the audio on my side was a bit hectic. The weather in Cape Town, it sounds like and it feels like it's the end of the world that's happening. But maybe just to share, I've obviously walked a journey in my previous capacity as head of talent at Capitec with the JVR group. And the initiative called Future Fit is still one of the most successful initiatives that is running in the company. It's been 5 years that we actually ran the assessment process. And it really validates a lot what you have shared to date around what is the value and the intent of the assessments. And maybe just to share a practical example, it was really as simple as our CEO at that stage, Gary Fourie, called me into his office and he said to me, you know what, the company is growing at such a rate that I don't know all these people. And I'm concerned from a succession perspective that I haven't got an opportunity to engage with everybody. So I don't have a feel of who is the individuals that are really the talent. And at that stage, we've done, talent reviews, but I mean, everybody walks on water. Nobody wants to tell somebody that you're not good enough. So the intent was to develop a program that is based on objective measures that can bring another lens or another voice to the room, where everybody is measured against the same yardstick. And that's where the value of the assessments came into the fore, because it's an objective framework, it's an objective measure. Everybody goes through the same process at the same point in time. And also the value of the consultant extending the feedback is that it is an objective player that plays back based on what the result says. It's not somebody else that is sharing a view based on 1 or 2 engagements. The one thing that we have found in the Capitec environment that did add value is, although the measure of the performance measure was done through a case study or simulation, we found that the revalidation of that performance score using 360s, performance scores also a bit debatable, but anyway, to add some other measures in to substitute or to almost enrich the performance component was actually very critical. But it actually gave such a great opportunity for a standard framework, and everybody speaks to the same agenda. And since then, there's been quite a number of individuals that have since been promoted into senior executive positions. People have moved across the business, because it actually just makes the conversation around your talent and your succession pool that much easier. And then linking it with acquisition, also to start building in similar types of assessments when you know that there's a gap in your succession pipeline, and you want to go to market and find somebody that has the potential to be developed in an accelerated fashion, to then build your assessments into your recruitment strategy preemptively. And again, that has yielded a massive amount of results in the positive lens, that you have a snapshot of what the potential is. There's still the opportunity to test the performance and the culture fit in practice when the person started working. But I think that's what the value is of an engagement like this, is we're singing from the same hymn book, rather than us trying to define or defend the talent rating that is in a lot of cases slightly subjective.
Jana, the fact that you've been in corporate for such a long time gives you, you have insight around how it practically happens. And just out of curiosity, just because I don't have that view, did you guys incorporate other sources into the audit, or I'm saying audit, to the mapping, meaning did expertise and experience and skills and I'm thinking of qualifications and all of that also play a role in actually the mapping of the talent?
Yeah, I think it was more not maybe the mapping of the talent, but what do you do with the individual from a mobilization perspective? So we, for example, and I know that the team is still supporting Capitec, built a very customized bio form that is part of the process of assessment, where you actually enrich the individual's profile beyond what is this person bringing to the table, qualifications, experience, have they worked in different organizations, etc. What type of programs, learning, training have they done within Capitec and outside? And when it comes to the conversation around the mobilization, the development, and what is the options available to the individual, that biographical information or contextual information becomes extremely critical. And what is very interesting is that if you look at your senior leaders in a typical organization, they've done everything. So in a lot of cases, we had individuals that were in that top tier, the top of the top block. They've got 2 master's degrees. They're like the top of the top in the country or in the world in the expertise. What are you going to do with them from a mobilization perspective? And the debates at that stage was, they actually grew up in one organization. So we had a very strong pipeline around developing from internally. But it becomes a little bit of, I only know this one organization. I don't get challenged in my thinking because I only think and work with people in one organization. So there were conversations around looking at moving people, do a job secondment at another company, so things like that that's where the debates become, because you don't always have an opportunity for somebody to move into. How many companies have got senior leader positions available and you just like, let's see what comes out in your talent review. So the conversation is really around how do you mobilize the talent when you don't have a seat, you don't have a head count. We move people around. They literally got a call on a Monday morning to say, congratulations for your development. For 6 months, you're going to go to the branches. You need to be at this branch at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. See you. That was the
Enjoy.
conversation.
Yeah.
Enjoy. Hope
Yeah.
you can fit into your uniform. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to make a joke of it, but in a lot of cases, people rotated. So although in a similar level, moved the guy from credit to finance, from finance to risk, from risk to business engineering, and vice versa. And what is also then very important is that there's a contracting conversation, because it's now all good and well that you go sit in somebody else's seat, but what is the intent? So the executive of that area needed to have a conversation with the individual to say, okay, you're going to move into this space for the next 12 to 18 months, or let's see how it goes. But the intent is the following. We want you to take ownership of a business project, because the business project is linked to a specific development area. And we want to see, as you go through the business project, if you gain not only insights and understanding of the business beyond your credit or finance or risk frame of mind, but what else? What other behavioral capabilities do you want to develop? Giving people opportunity to sit on excos and mancos and take ownership and lead a project. I mean, that's incredible opportunities. So although you get the work experience and exposure, you also get the development opportunity.
Absolutely. Charlene, I see your hands up.
Yes, it's so valuable to hear from corporate spaces what's so important. And I just wanted to highlight two things. The first one, Nicolette highlighted, the importance of using psychometrics correctly. So using the right tools and using them in the right way, and the value that can add. And then how that feeds into what Jana mentioned, your performance measure. Is that actually reliable and valid? Is it a good measure? And Jana, how you spoke about moving the people around, and how brilliant it is if your performance measure is not tied to a specific role or a specific industry. You're taking away from that that can potentially be dangerous, that subjectivity from the manager's perspective. But if you have a reliable, valid tool that you're using to measure the performance in line with a proper psychometric instrument or a battery of instruments, that's when we can really see value in this picture in front of us. Then we can actually really rely on the numbers that we're seeing here. But if we don't have those two building blocks, proper building blocks, I can just imagine one can see mismatch in this kind of picture, and it's not really you're not gonna understand, but why aren't the psychometric results speaking to our performance measure? And I know from a data perspective, that's often our big challenge. Great, we've got an to assess a good number, a good sample of people, but we don't know that we can trust the performance measure being used. So there's not much value that we can then add from a data perspective if we can't trust with certainty that we're actually measuring performance, if we're saying we're measuring it. So I just wanted to highlight that, seeing how it plays out in the practical examples.
No, absolutely. Keys, I don't know if you've got any opinions. I don't want to hog the direction the conversation is going.
No, I think I'm loving the conversation. I think internally we were trying to, it's such a beautiful topic, but really broad. So we said, let's talk personality. And I'm loving exactly the conversation that's happening. When we're talking potential, we're not talking just personality. We are really talking this whole person. Their skills, their expertise, their qualifications, their EQ, their cognitive performance, their personality as well. So I think just from a potential side, yes, I think happy that this went wrong. When we're talking potential, we are really talking human potential rather than just what we've seen from a personality perspective. Also really love that we are using and we're seeing the value of assessments in that way, that it's almost triangulating what we're seeing in CVs and what we're seeing in the interview as that third or the fourth step in actually seeing whether this person has potential or not. And then Jana, I wish I could talk to you all day, every day, because there's a wealth of knowledge there, as well as with so many of us on the call today. But I think then to try to close up, yes, I wish we had more time on this. But from what Jana was saying, and even what Nicolette and Manisha was saying earlier, I think then it's really important for us, and trying to answer Andrew's question as well, where do you start? I think it depends on your organization, possibly given budgetary restraints. But what Jana was just talking about now, like job hopping and really helping these individuals actualize, I think that would work really well for an individual who is showing in that top right quadrant over there that high potential and high performance, because they would be able to rise up to that challenge. They're showing that potential, and they have that performance with them as well. We can argue this and debate this. Definitely going to be a second session, but maybe we wouldn't have that same mapping for someone in this area where they have that performance, they have that track record, they doing their job brilliantly, but their assessments and how we know them as a person, I'm not just talking personality, might be on the lower side. These individuals really enjoy that stability. They may be the individuals who have, we all start as entry-level employees at some point, but maybe, yeah, your individuals who have started entry level in an organization and really learned the ropes of that particular organization and are quite comfortable with the stability. And that's where understanding where their potential lies is really important, because they are a high performer and we don't want to take that away from them if we're seeing that they don't have potential in whatever way we're measuring potential, personality, EQ. Hopefully we're taking into account everything. But an individual in this type of quadrant wouldn't necessarily be able or want to job hop too much. That's how they perform well, by getting that, having that stability that they can go with, which is also difficult and quite challenging in today's world of work, where we are seeing, so again, I'm trying to balance the practical and the academic, but from like, given how the world of work is changing and how fast we need to adapt and change, this, it can very quickly, if you are moved into a different role, this type of individual can quickly become a low performer, because that they enjoy their processes and their structures so much that when they upturned, that they don't know what to do with themselves, they don't know how to do the job anymore, and yeah, if they're changing like a culture or they're changing environments, it might overwhelm them. So I think when we're looking at a person's potential and how do we develop them, then I think, and that's what we're all saying to each other, is to, when we're looking at performance, to also take in their potential holistically. What does it mean? What does their potential mean? What is it that they are able to do well? So then when we're looking at, would this individual be able to job hunt or job hop, then looking at their flexibility, for example, or their stress tolerance from an EQ perspective, or looking at their ambition from a personality perspective. Do they actually want to be in this leadership position? Do they want to be the best in the world? I think that's important. If we're looking at the lower performers, of course, we don't want to say, okay, you're not performing, bye, resign, CCMA will come for all of us, if it was so simple. But these individuals, on the one hand, it might not make budget sense to invest in these individuals, because as it is, because they're not performing, everybody else in the team kind of needs to pick up their slack. Like I think Nicola said, these individuals take a lot of mental time. But again, we all have some strengths. So possibly sit with them and see, maybe it's just a job role mismatch, and how can we replace them or place them elsewhere? Like Manisha was saying, I think if we're talking talent mapping, how can we map the potential that they do have to a job that would fit them better potentially? And then these individuals, these low performers and high potential, why is it that they're not performing? Is it the culture thing? And what, again, then we would need to check, is it our performance measure that's maybe possibly skewed, or some other culture issue within the organization that everybody's just rating this individual poorly? Or is it something else? Is it that they have the potential, but they're not motivated to actually perform? Or they within a space where their whole team is actually your low performers, low potential, and that's now a learned skill that they're just going to be with everybody else. So I think this is a very simplified graph. We've also said that, but it kind of gets the conversation going, as we saw today. Yeah, and that was just my takeaway and trying to summarize so much of what was said here today.
No, thank you, Keys, and I agree. I think one can spend a day in trying to take an actual organization, unpack what the strategies are and what could possibly be done in these various categories. One or two takeaways just from my perspective. First of all, for us as especially independent consultants, we tend to very easily sell assessments and selection, and that is also typically what the market asks for. But there's a wealth of information that gets lost if it's not used further than that. We need to keep on asking for good performance criteria, because everything we do as psychologists will depend on the ROI, any return, any financial return that we can prove, and strategic conversation we can have requires performance criteria. And we tend to, after the fact, sometimes ask for it. So do you have anything like absenteeism? But we don't plan for it in the beginning. Contextual information, so actually making use of other sources of information, not merely assessments, and then potentially the performance is another aspect and then aggregating our data, meaning we tend to work on an individual level, but we try to scale it. So we've got 30 individuals with individual PDF reports, but we tend to not always aggregate it to a level of, okay, let's just look at the big picture, let's look at the data. And I think for me, that was enormously insightful through the exercises that we've went with these candidates, clients specifically. Any other, knowing that we've got 2 minutes left, any other thoughts? Any other opinions, questions? Doesn't sound like it. Dead quiet. I think I want to just on that note, thanks, Keys, for sharing some of the work that you've done with clients in this regard. From a JVR perspective, we need to ensure that we've got suggestions around some of these assessments that could be used on scale. That would allow from a budget perspective. We know that the Hogan's work and it's fantastic, but we need to just make sure that we've got options available, and then learn from one another. And I think that is the intention of this open dialogue as well. We'll communicate what's the next topic going to be. If you've got any thoughts, any burning issues that you're faced with, drop us an email and let us know, because it just helps chatting about it and learning from one another. So thanks, Keys, for prepping. Thanks for everybody attending. And on that note, it's Friday, and as you said, Keys, it's payday, so it's a good Friday then.
Thanks, Keys. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Keys.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicolette. Thanks, everybody. Dropping. Leaving.